You want to start? Okay. Uh, we'll start then. So, welcome everyone today for today's sessions. You know me. If the people who don't know me, I'm Sriram. So we also have Kishore in the panel. Okay, and as part of the ongoing training program, this is the third session. This is third session. Today's topic is about identification of woodland birds by Gopal Krishna. Okay, I'll give a 1 minute introduction about Gopal. So Gopal, he's been birding since I think we also told about this previously when we had physical meet. He has more than 20 years of bird watching experience. He completed his PhD from CCMB and is been living in Hyderabad since last 10 years. He is basically originally from Kerala. Okay, and I know Gopal since 2015 when I started my bird watching journey, where we traveled together for most of the places in Telangana to document birds. So I learned the art of identifying birds by their calls from him. So he also contributed significantly to Indian Birds Journal. He wrote a lot of articles on some of the topics of the articles which are written are dusky eagle sightings in Telangana, distribution of green munia in Eastern Ghats, and he a couple of articles. One is related to paradise flycatchers which are seen in Telangana state, and also the recent spurwing lapping sighting which happened in Warangal. So these are all the scientific documents which he contributed for Indian Bird Journal. Before I hand it over to Gopal, right, I wanted to, we'll follow the same process what we followed last session. All the participants will be on mute. So if you have any questions, put it in the chat window. Either me or Kishore, who are in the panel, will answer these questions. So if you still have questions at the end of the session, you can ask directly to Gopal related to the topic. Okay, over to you, Gopal.
Thank you, Sriram, for that wonderful introduction. So today's topic is about woodland birds. So first, what do you need to see birds in woodlands? So woodland birds require not only your eyes to see, but also your ears to hear. Why? Because this is how a woodland looks like. Woodlands are basically, this is a photograph from Anantagiri Hills, which means it has got a lot of trees, a lot of creepers, a lot of leaves, and the light penetration is low, and then it makes things more difficult for you to see. And then to identify birds which are present in woodlands, not only sight, not only a pair of binoculars, you would also need to listen to see from which direction the bird is coming to correctly pinpoint. Sometimes you might identify the birds just by their call itself. And sometimes these calls and sounds will help you to find the direction of the bird and then look and then see and then identify. So for woodland birding, you need to have both eyes as well as ears for bird watching. So last session's a brief recap. The 5 Ws of bird identification, you need to observe for the size of the bird based on the 4 common species like sparrow, myna, crow, or duck, and approximate it to one of the birds or say larger or smaller to one of the birds which you are most familiar with. That is a W number 1. The color of the bird. So identify the major colors like in this photograph which is there. You can see different colors of the bird. Try to identify the bird, the color of the birds. And then the third one is to observe what the bird was doing. Was it sitting? Was it swimming? Was it calling? Was it feeding? Etc. etc. And then the fourth question, where did you see the bird? And that also pertains to this topic of today, which is woodland. So here the answers for a generalist or for an overall bird watching would be if it is water, ground, tree top, and flying. In a woodland habitat, you can see the bird maybe pecking the tree, maybe sitting on top of the canopy, maybe sitting between the canopy, maybe coming down to the ground, again flying back to the mid-level branches. So those things you can note in terms of a woodland bird identification. And of course, when do you see the bird is the time of the season and the time of the day will actually help you in narrowing down the identification species. The Merlin Bird app, which will help you a lot in answering these queries to shortlist the species which you could have been seeing to come to a conclusion. Coming straight without wasting any time on introduction to the woodland birds of Hyderabad. So woodland birds are the birds which either thrive in forested habitats or trees, or they depend at some point of time in their day or their daily habits, relying on trees for either nesting or feeding or shelter or all of these. So in a city like Hyderabad, let's begin with the common woodland birds that you can see. In the last session, Sriram already described the bulbuls. So this is a different bulbul. That was a red-banded bulbul. This is a white-browed bulbul. You know why it is called white-browed bulbul? You can see a whitish brow, which means just like how we have the eyebrows, it is an eyebrow. So it's called the white-browed bulbul. The size is smaller than a myna. Once you see the bird, it is a resident, and then it is a fruit eater basically, and it is of least concern. Throughout my slides, birds, when they are described on the left-hand side, you can also see where these birds have been spotted within the limits of the ORR and slightly outside also. So this bird can be fairly seen throughout the habitats of Hyderabad. Not only woodland areas such as Sanjeevaya Park or Indira Park or maybe Osmania University, Hyderabad Central University, which are thick wooded areas within the city limits. They also can be seen in small uncultivated patches, land areas which are under controversies. There will be some shrub growth. These birds will come, eat small berries from plants like lantana and other small bird plant species. And that is what you see. When you see this bird, the first prominent color which you note would be a dark yellowish gray color and with a white brow. So that is what you note. If you can get more time to observe this bird, then you can see a dark legs, a longer tail, a dark beak, and also some information on the call of this bird. So this bird is a white-browed bulbul. The next one in the list is a coppersmith barbet. This is a very beautiful bird, and this bird stays predominantly on top of the canopy. And then this is also a bird which sometimes pecks the wood at a rapid pace. It makes holes in the wood where it nests in the city, and then it raises its chicks. Sometimes from the holes are from underneath axis, sometimes from a side axis, in such a way that it is free from predators such as snakes in the area. Coppersmith barbet has got a very peculiar call. It is like the coppersmith. Coppersmith is a person who beats the iron like cook, cook, cook. This repeated call is something which you can hear in the city early morning, sometimes late evenings, and it also identifies the bird. This is one exception. When I said calls can lead to the direction of the bird, coppersmith barbet has a habit of calling with their head in one direction and then slowly changing the direction of the head so that the calls are heard all around, but the exact pinpoint location is not known. So this also confuses the predators such as shikara and other small raptors in the city by evading its exact presence or exact location. On the left-hand side, you can see the map. It is present throughout the city. It is present in all what you call forested areas, and also even several housing colonies. Wherever there are fruiting trees or something, you can see this bird foraging. Sometimes they are seen in singles, sometimes they are seen in small groups, and occasionally when a tree is fruiting, you can see them in large groups. Coming to the next bird is the Indian golden oriole. A very beautiful bird, bright yellow colors, sometimes get hidden inside the canopy of a tree. So for example, a female, when you look at the tree, mostly you'll be looking at, when your head up, you'll see the white belly with some stripes. But when the bird flies from one tree to the other, you can see the bright yellow colors. And then your male has got a black wing patch or a blackish wings with their body even brighter in yellow. And the female is slightly duller or dull yellow colored with these streaks arising from the breast till the belly. It is a resident bird. In Telangana, you can see it throughout all seasons. And it is also a predominantly what you call a fruit-eating bird, a small fruit or a berry-eating bird. And then as you can see the map on the left-hand side, it is seen throughout Hyderabad. So, and when it flies, another notable point is that it, what you call, produces a shrill call or a harsh call, which also can identify, also can help you to identify the bird species. This is a small bird, which is also common in Hyderabad. It is called as a common iora. It again stays in the mid canopy range. The male is dark or blackish on the top with some wing white patches and bright yellowish from the throat, neck, and the belly. Okay, the photo on the left hand side is the male and the one on the right hand side is the female. It is a small bird. Sparrow size, you can say, or maybe slightly bigger than the sparrow size. And then the most evident thing of this bird is its call. It has got a very sweet call. It's got numerous calls. And then it keeps on changing its melodious calls, which you can actually open the app Merlin and also see them. It eats basically insects and then sometimes worms and cobwebs and the spiders, I mean, not the cobwebs, and some other ground insects are very rarely taken in. Predominantly, it will stay in the mid-level branches. Sometimes during the early morning hours, it can ascend to the canopy for the basking behavior. And then once the heat picks up, it always comes down to the central bank. And then it does call whenever it is sitting idly or silently, sorry, not silently, in a place in between the woodlands. This is a bird which you can hear the call, especially when it is disturbed with an alarm call. And then during the other hours, it has got a very sweet melodious call. If you look into the distribution map of common iora, again, it is seen throughout the city. And then it can be very well seen in the habitat where you are staying near, if there are some small trees or shrubs or plantation like in, housing colonies or communities. It is very much possible that you can see this bird in right beside you. The next bird is an even smaller bird. So this is a bird which is smaller than the size of a sparrow. If you see this bird, the first prominent thing which you note is a white eye ring. The eye, although the bird's name is an Indian white eye, the eye is not white. The eye is yellow. But because of the presence of the white ring around its eye, it is called as a white eye. It has got a very small beak. Overall, if you see a small bird with yellowish color and a grayish belly. So it is again a resident bird. It moves from one tree to the other in small flocks of 5 to 10. And then it does something like a group hunting of the tree. It goes into a tree, it looks at small insects, grubs, it feeds on them. Once that is over, it moves to the next tree. And then while moving, it keeps on calling. This calling behavior is what you can identify or hear from. And then this calling behavior also keeps the entire group together. So when one group moves from one place to the other, you can also hear them and see them flying. This is a very small bird. You might require a pair of binoculars to see this really, or to see all these features evidently. But then you can easily hear the call of these birds to understand that this is the species which is moving from one tree to the other in the place where you reside or the place where you go for birding. If you see the distribution map of the Indian white-eye, it is again present throughout the city, including all housing places, including the buildings. Wherever there are some kind of plantations, you can see this bird present. These are all the birds which we described till now are all resident species, which means they can be seen both in the winter as well as in the summer, and they nest in their particular habitats which they reside, which is the city. Okay. Then comes to the next set of species. I will leave some time after the parakeet session if you have to ask any questions. Okay. So it is parakeets and not parrots. India does not have any parrot species except for the vernal hanging parrot, which is different from the parrots. And then we have two parakeet species predominantly in the city, which is the rose-ringed parakeet, which Sriram covered in the last session. And the next one is the plum-headed parakeet. The rose-ringed parakeet has got a rose ring along with a black ring in its neck. And the females have a dark area or maybe the inconspicuous ring around its neck. It's got a very bright beak, overall greenish color. I'm sure everybody are familiar with a parakeet. And this is one which you can see predominantly throughout the city, beside buildings, beside plantations, beside parks, everywhere throughout the building. It is a kind of woodland species which is also non-specialized. So why this is also partly woodland? Because a lot of time, it goes to paddy fields or wherever grains are available for feeding, and after which it comes back to the trees to spend the most of their times for shelter. So you can see them in urban parks in good numbers, in what you call gardens, in agricultural fields, and there they forage and then they nest in tree cavities. So if there are trees with holes, they prefer nesting in that area, which is basically what we are also looking for in the city surveys. The other parakeet species, which is less familiar, is the plum-headed parakeet. They are slightly smaller than the rose-ringed parakeet, and they are very, very conspicuous because of their colors. A plum-headed parakeet has got a strong red patch on their head for the males and a gray patch for the females, a gray-headed color for the females, whereas the rose-ringed parakeets have got red beaks. The plum-headed parakeets have got prominent yellow beaks. So the males also have a shoulder patch. In some birds, it is conspicuous. In some birds, it may not be conspicuous. They have a bluish tail followed by a 1/3 portion or a 1/4 portion, which is white tipped. So whenever you see the bird flying, you can prominently see and identify that white tail, which also can help you in identification of this bird. The calls between this bird and the roasting parakeets are also different. This produces a single noted soft call, whereas the roasting parakeets produces a strong, maybe slightly harsh call, which also can lead to its identification. When you compare the prevalence of this species to the rose-ringed parakeets are present everywhere throughout the city within the ORR range and also outside. Whereas this is slightly more limited. So wherever there are parks or a connected stretch of woodland habitats, you may see them. So a lot of this data are historically contributed. As the time progresses in today's time, the number of rose-ringed parakeets sighted within the city limits in the last 4 or 5 years have been really low. And then there are a few dozen of records of this species. But during your surveys, winters, some trees, some berries might be fruiting. You may encounter the species for which now you have the key to identify. Okay, so before I go into the next batch, if you have any questions, you can raise the hands and then ask. Or if you have any questions raised, yeah, please. Okay, sure.
John?
Yeah. Yeah. Hi, Gopal Krishna. You mentioned India doesn't have parrots. So what's the difference between parrots and parakeets? Would you like to
Parrots
know?
are very large birds which are basically African. The parrots are large birds.
Mm-hmm.
They have there is a lot of differences. There are no similarities, I must say, but
Mm-hmm.
because parakeets are not, the names are not so popular, most of the people in India call the parakeets as parrots. They are also
Mm-hmm.
frugivorous. They are very strong beaks. If you go to some of these aviaries, you see these
Mm-hmm.
what you call blue and yellow macaws. They're all in the parrot family.
Right.
So if you look at genetically, the mitochondrial DNA divergence are so different that they are not anywhere close by in the what you call in the
Mm-hmm.
relationship of the
Same
family.
category.
Yes. And then parakeets also have a shorter lifespan, about 25 to 30 years at the maximum, whereas parrots, they are much longer living, up to 90 plus years.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so there are all these differences. So I must say that there are no similarities
Mhm.
between parrots and parakeets.
Okay. So there are no parrots in India at all.
So vernal hanging
Yeah.
parrot is a very small parrot,
Mm-hmm.
which is the closest relative. It's a hanging parrot, not exactly a
Mm-hmm.
parrot, but if you can call it as a parrot, the vernal hanging parrot is the only parrot which is present in India.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so okay, one more question. After that, I'll continue.
Yes, I will say. You can go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I was earlier just reading on Google parakeets, parrots. It says the AI answer says parakeets are a type of parrot. So all parakeets are parrots, but not all parrots are parakeets. Is that false then? Uh,
So
from what you
yeah,
just said, that they're
perhaps
totally distinct.
yeah, so they are totally different in the terms of their family. Siptakula is a totally different family. So in terms of
Okay.
feeding, in terms of eating, they are all frugivorous. So in some point in time, they would have had a common ancestor, but
Ah,
then they diverged
okay.
long before, long ago. So as of today, they are very distinct families at the moment. And then, they also have
Okay.
a geographical divergence, whereas parrots are basically more towards the African countries, whereas parakeets are, limited to certain other areas in the Southeast Asia and other places.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so then I come to the woodpeckers. So basically, woodlands means you would be looking at woodpeckers. There are three species of woodpeckers which you may find in the city of Hyderabad. One is the black rum flameback, the second one is the yellow crown woodpecker, and third one is the brown cap pygmy woodpecker. We'll go one by one. The black rum flameback is the most common woodpecker which you still see in the city limits. Although their presence are not as much as how you see the parakeets or any other species, they are still widely present. For them, you need tall trees, which are well-wooded trees, where they drum, make holes, and then they stay in them. So it is not small stretches of trees which they stay. You need a slightly larger stretch of areas where they have to fly from one tree to the other in an easier manner, and locations which have such trees would be the places where you can find the black rum flameback. Some areas within Hyderabad would be the Osmania universities and the Hyderabad Central Universities. The belt of educational institutions in near the Habsiguda to Uppal stretch is one other place where you see the black rum flamebacks. So Sanjeevaya Park and the Indira Park also has got some tall trees, and they also have some black rum flameback woodpeckers. And then if there are two less trees, you are very unlikely to see this bird, except when they traverse from one habitat or one woodland stretch to the other woodland stretch in search of food, which is also a rare occurrence because it's just basically a flight dependent observation. Woodpeckers overall have a very typical bobbing flight pattern. They fly for some time, then they close their wings, and then again they dip down, and then again they fly. So if you see a bird of this flight pattern, you can at least hint it out. This gives you a hint that this is a woodpecker possibly which is flying. This black rump flameback is the resident species. Whenever it what you call pecks the wood, not always it is actually trying to make a hole. So it also searches in between the barks for these tiny grubs which it consumes. It is basically an invertebrate feeder. And then if you see the distribution, a lot of the places within the Hyderabad ring road areas have the presence of black rump flameback. This is the most common which you can see, which most common woodpecker which you can see during the surveys that we would be doing. The next species is the yellow-crowned woodpecker. Although this is classified as a non-specialized species, and then we tend to categorize to see this bird in multiple habitats, this is actually a shy bird. So if there are too much of disturbances, too much of sound, this bird does not like such habitats and tries to move away. So the closest place now, if you want to see this bird with considerable reliability, would be the Narasapur Forest Park or some other areas. So places like Chilkur Balaji Temple also. So the forest around the Chilkur Balaji Temple and the areas also have some population. If you look at the distribution on the left hand side, there are very few places where you see this bird at the moment. So still there is some of these areas fall under our cells of survey. So there is always a possibility that you see this bird. So this is again a bird which is slightly around the myna size or slightly smaller than the myna size. And then it has got a yellow forehead with a prominent white hind head color. And then there is a black and white combination on the wings, which also looks like rice grains or a small speckled appearance. So these are some of the features which you can use to identify this bird. But being this a woodpecker, you always can see this bird not sitting on top of a tree, but it is usually sitting sometimes on the side, sometimes underneath, and they hop from one point to the other in search of grubs or insects on the holes which they create on the woods so that they can feed on them. This is one woodpecker. Again, another woodpecker, which is the brown cap pygmy woodpecker, is also another woodpecker which is quite shy. Very similar patterns, but there are no colors. As the name suggests, it's a pygmy woodpecker. It is almost the size of a sparrow, maybe slightly bigger in terms of comparison. It has got a very triangular pointed beak, which it used to chisel through the wood and also through the bark to find for grubs. Again, this also makes very small holes in the trees where it nests. And there is a typical call for this bird, but it seldom calls in noisy areas. So unlikely that you'll see this bird calling. But given an opportunity, this bird can be sighted in some of the parks within the Hyderabad limits, which we would be surveying. So brown cap pygmy woodpecker is conspicuously identified by the brown cap followed by a white eye line mark which leads until its back, followed by a brown color, and then again these white stripes. If you compare this bird with the yellow-crowned woodpecker, so this is about 13 centimeter, which is a sparrow size, and this is slightly smaller than the myna. If you see these birds together, of course, the other features will help you identify between these two species. Another species which is possible, although we hope we see some of them during our surveys. So these are the three woodpeckers which you are likely to
Gopal, I
see.
just wanted to add one more. I think we missed, sorry, I think one more woodpecker which is common, but I think we forgot to include is white-named woodpecker. Probably because that is more common than these brown capped. Maybe we forgot to add that, but we'll discuss about at white-named woodpecker at the end of the session.
Yeah, so white-napped, I can actually add some points as Sriram already added here. So again, a white-napped woodpecker is very similar looking to this bird, which is the brown black rump flame back, but the entire back till the dorsal portion of this bird is white. So there are sexual dimorphisms in this bird where the male is having a red crown and the female is having a yellow crown. And the calls are also conspicuously different from the black rump flameback, and which helps you in identification of this bird. But again, well-wooded habitats are required for the species. Along with the, they are also possible in the cities where, or in the areas where we have well-wooded trees, something like Osmania University, Hyderabad Central University, probably Sanjeevaya Park may or may not be present in that areas. Then we come to the drongos in the city. So I'll discuss two drongos basically, the ashy drongo, the white-bellied drongo. The black drongo, I think Sriram already discussed, which is the most common bird, which is black with a forked tail. And then there is also one very uncommon species which is present in the Hyderabad city, which is the hair-crested drongo, or previously called as the spangled drongo. So the only hold of this species is the Osmania University at the moment. The landscape garden in the place does hold a few pairs which are breeding. And then if one wants to see this bird, that is the place to go. Of course, after you take the permissions for visiting the park, the university. Okay, let's come to the common species. Ashy drongo at first is slightly smaller than the black drongo. The black drongo looks very similar, which is blackish, and also it has got a black spot below the base of the beak. It is called as the rectal spot. This does not have, that is the first thing to describe this bird. If somebody can observe this bird closely, it has got a deep forked tail when come to the black drongo. And then it is very close to the black drongo. It's very easy to confuse this bird. The next point is that this is a migratory bird. Black drongo is a resident. Although some individuals do stay throughout the summer, most of the ashy drongos are migratory and are only seen during the winter period. The habits and the habitats and the feed behaviors are mostly the same, but the ashy drongo prefers well-wooded habitats and then share the invertebrate feeds just like the woodpeckers, and can be seen towards the fringes of the forest or fringes of the ecosystem of well-wooded forests, where they also hunt for flies and also consume them. So if you see on the left-hand side, they do have a considerable distribution through the city, and especially, and these are sightings during the winter. And you may possibly see during the surveys which we are actually going to conduct. Drongos also have this ability to mimic the calls. Black drongo is not a great mimicker, whereas ashy drongo is a very good mimic. So if there are other bird calls, it will attempt to mimic the calls. So since it is not a perfect mimic, you can also see some of the call of the ashy drongo along with the mimicry. So which also helps you identify that this is not the mimicry bird, or this is actually the call of the ashy drongo, where it is trying to mimic another species of bird. The next species is the white-bellied drongo. Again, this is a resident species which you can see in and around well-birded areas or well-wooded areas in Hyderabad. So you may not see it in and around apartments, although there could be rare sightings where it traverses from one habitat to the other. It also shares a lot of features with drongo. This does not have a deep forked tail, unlike the previous one where you can see the deep forked tail. The most prominent thing which you can see here is its white belly. So from the throat or just below the throat, the whiteness starts and then it ends until the vent. So this very clean white color you can see in this bird. And if you look at the size, it's again about slightly, it's about myna size, slightly slimmer than the myna. And when compared to the black drongo, again, this white belly is a differentiation factor, and also it does not have this white spot at the base of the beak, which the black drongo has. So another reason for confusion could be the juveniles of the black drongo, which also could have a streaked white belly, but then this white belly is very prominent, clear white, and then that can be differentiated from the black drongos with relative ease. So these are the two drongos which we discuss for the city habitats. Then we come to the cuckoo shrikes and the wood shrikes possibly present in the city area. One is the Indian cuckoo shrike, the second is the black-headed cuckoo shrike, and the common wood shrike. So this was erstwhile called as the large cuckoo shrike, which recently got updated to the Indian cuckoo shrike. This bird has got a loud call whenever it flies, and then it is unmistakable when it calls. Okay, it is streaked. It is a grayish bird of approximately the myna size with a prominent white vent. And then when it flies from one tree to the other, and then it requires slightly more thicker a tree kind of vegetation, a tree with some creepers, where it can actually conceal itself during flights or one point to the other. It prefers such kind of habitats. If you want to see the Rajendra Nagar, the Agricultural University, the Veterinary University, and allied areas, they have a very good population of the Indian cuckoo shrikes. And then the moment you go there, you can see them calling, hearing, and also several parts of the northern Telangana, we can see the species. Not overall distributed well, if you see the map on the left side, but several areas have got sightings, and in winters it tends to, because summer is the breeding time, they tend to expand their breeding range. There is a possibility that we see the birds in unreported areas as per this map as well. This bird is again an insect eater, so it looks into trees, the crevices of the trees, and then looks for insects. So that behavior also can be noted for the Indian cuckoo shrike. The next species, which is very similar, is a black-headed cuckoo shrike. The female could be confusing with the Indian cuckoo shrike, but here the female is prominently or predominantly gray, and it is darker, much darker than the Indian cuckoo shrike. So which gives the idea that this is the possibility of the female of the black-headed cuckoo shrike. The male is very distinct. You can see the prominent black head and the whitish belly. And then whenever it flies, you can see this black and white contrasting bird which is flying, and then it makes it easier for you to identify. This is again slightly smaller than the large cuckoo shrike or the Indian cuckoo shrike, which also gives you a key into the identification. So if you look into the distribution, it is also what we call sparsely distributed, or it is also evenly distributed throughout the city. But sometimes the females are more difficult to identify, so it goes away unidentified. So if you look into the colors of this bird, it is much more grayer with some fine streaks in the belly when compared to the Indian wood shrike, which is much larger, much larger. This is 27 centimeters, this is about 20 centimeters. That difference is very conspicuous when you see the bird in the field, and that can help you in the identification of the black-headed cuckoo shrike. The other one is the common wood shrike. It is even smaller bird. So this is 20 centimeters in size, whereas the common wood shrike is smaller in size. It has got a very sweet call. It does call during the morning hours and the evening hours. If you see the bird, you can see the prominent white brow. The white eyebrow is so prominent. and followed by, if you have seen this photograph, you can see this black eye patch. So that contrast will actually help you in identifying this bird. And overall, the entire belly is pale or whitish in color. So it helps in differentiation between the other species. And then this is not black. This is actually brownish dorsum. And this actually helps in identifying this bird even more better. So it is very unlikely that anybody will get confused between the wood shrikes and the cuckoo shrikes, which we have seen. And this is again a smaller bird, which is slightly bigger than the sparrow, definitely smaller than the myna, a resident in Hyderabad. The numbers in Hyderabad have drastically reduced, although you can still see this bird in some of the prominent areas, especially towards the Rajendra Nagar, towards the Shamshabad, and some other areas towards Vanasthalipuram, etc. So those are the wood shrikes. Then comes the leaf bird. There are two leaf birds. One is the Jordan's leaf bird, and then there is the golden fronted leaf bird. The leaf bird is so called because they are having a leaf green color in their body. Both Jordan's leaf bird and the golden fronted leaf bird appear very similar. The leaf bird requires an undisturbed tree population for them to reside. So it's very difficult to see this bird because they camouflage very well with the tree leaves. But when they move, their black and blue throat gives way to its location and its identification. So they have a very melodious call, which you can identify. There's very conspicuous. And the male and female are also different. It is often confused. These two species are often confused. So always it needs an additional care. So the golden fronted leaf bird has got a prominent roof, orangish, yellowish mix, like exactly called golden. And then it is very prominent when there is a sunlight falling on it or when there is a bright light conditions. Whereas this has got a very greenish, dark greenish forehead, the male of the Jordan's leaf bird. And so that is one way to differentiate these two species. The numbers in the city has gone down quite much, and most of these reports are historical, but still we do see some of these leaf birds in the Osmania University campus in some point in time, and also the Hyderabad Central University campus. So they are small sized birds, approximately myna, maybe slightly smaller than the myna. So the behavior of this bird that they stay on top of the canopy, slightly below sub canopy level, and they hop from one branch to the other constantly, very occasionally coming out to the tip of the canopy to make calls and again quickly go back. So because of their colors, it is very difficult to identify or spot them, but their call is also very useful in identifying them. The same is with the golden fronted leaf bird. Although these species have been reported, there is no evidence within the city, but this is a bird which is possible, and then it is one bird which we also could be looking for within the city limits, especially in well-wooded areas, some places like Sanjeevaya Park, Osmania University, Rajendra Nagar, the Hyderabad Central University campus, some of the Secunderabad cantonment areas are also very conducive sites for this bird to be seen. Both these birds are frugivorous. So I'm telling both of the behaviors together, both are frugivorous, where if there is a tree with a lot of fruiting together, you are likely, there is a higher probability to see these birds towards those trees. And then they stay within the tree for a much longer period before they move from one tree to the other. So sometimes when they stay in a banyan tree, which is fruiting, they stay in the tree for the entire morning, eating the fruits from one branch to the other, rather than fly from one tree to the other for finding new or food. During breeding period, this bird also feeds on insects for the proteins, and also sometimes eats the base of the flower, which also includes the nectar as well as the other parts of the flower for their nutrition. So there is this Jordan's leaf bird is highly possible during our surveys. And then we also could expect the presence of the golden fronted leaf bird in some of our surveys. Then we have babblers. They are loud birds, as the name suggests. Yellow-billed babbler, Sriram already described during the last session. We also have another species, jungle babblers. Both these birds are very similar looking and therefore very easily confused. This is the yellow-billed babbler which Sriram described last time. If you see the bird, they have a whitish head, and therefore they were previously called as the white-headed babblers, and now called as the yellow-billed babblers, which are because that name suits them more. And there are other white-headed babblers in other parts of the country, and also the word, which could be easily confused. So yellow-billed babblers are loud birds. They are group birds. They stay on the lower side of the canopy. So both these babblers are called litter birds. So which means they come down to the fallen leaves. They move the leaves one by one to see the insects which are lying underneath the leaves or hiding underneath the leaves. So they are active throughout the day because they are always under the canopy and the temperature does not fluctuate too much within the canopy. So they forage throughout the day. When they fly from one group to the other, they make loud calls which are very, very clearly heard for over a distance. They are the size of a myna or maybe slightly smaller in terms of length. And they eat insects, they eat berries, they are omnivorous in concerns. The jungle babbler is also omnivorous. They eat berries. Like you can see in this photo, they are sitting on the ground where there is a lot of litter. And they again do the same behavior. But to differentiate between these two species, you can see the white head which you saw in the yellow-billed babbler is not present in the jungle babbler. Secondly, the jungle babblers are slightly bigger. So this is about 22 centimeters. This is about 25 centimeters. Maybe difficult to identify. But still, you can see that these birds are bigger. And the calls are very, very strong. Their calls are slightly harsh and well differentiated from the calls of the yellow-billed babblers. Again, these birds are so-called jungle babblers because they prefer slightly larger jungle habitats for their groups. And unlike yellow-billed babblers, which can also be seen in jungle and also in open habitats, these are preferably seen in jungle habitats where there are some trees and also some open habitat kind of a mix. So initially one might think that it is tricky to identify between them, but the lighter colors of the yellow-billed babbler gives the key to the identification when compared to the jungle babblers. And if you can also hear their calls, then it becomes much more evident that the jungle babblers have a very harsh call when compared to the yellow-billed babblers. So both these babblers, they stay mid-canopy, they come down to forage. Again, in the site of the slightest disturbance, they have a same behavior. And they fly back to the higher canopy levels. Recently, I visited the BITS, Birla Institute of Technology, Hyderabad campus. They have a good population of jungle babblers. And they have both these babblers and they can be seen together. And then it is one of the places where you can comparatively see both these species. So if you see the distribution of the yellow-billed babbler, it is much more distributed throughout the Hyderabad, the inner ring, the ORR limits, whereas jungle babblers are much lesser when compared to the ORR limits. But still they are present. Although several records are historical, we do still have a lot of records present within the city limits. And then whenever you see a babbler, you should be also careful in observing some of these features which can help you differentiate between the two babblers. Okay, I'll again take a break to see if there are any questions before I move into the flycatchers. Yeah, Kishore.
Yeah, so nothing much here from the questions. Uh, there was one question probably which anyway Sriram has answered, but why large gray babblers are not included? So maybe we can answer that.
Yeah, so large gray babblers can also be included because
But
this is a basic
So
presentation.
we covered in the
Written
generalist
generalist.
birds, Gopal.
Yes, in the gentlest birds. Okay.
Yeah.
So they are all large gray babblers are also seen. They are very different from them. They have a different behavior. They prefer open habitats exclusively. Yeah, like gentlest birds, you know. So yes, they can also be sighted towards the periphery of the city. And some sightings are also there within the city. Osmania universities campuses do have large gray babblers. HCU campuses do have large gray babblers. Sanjeevaya Park also has got some.
And sometimes you can see all three together also. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah,
Sanjeevaya
Yeah.
Park is one place where you can see
all three together.
a decent population of the large gray babblers within the city if anybody wants to have a look at them. Then comes to the flycatchers. Okay. So we have a lot of flycatchers. So they are called flycatchers because they catch flies. So we have the Tickell's blue flycatcher, which is the commonest flycatcher throughout the city. The fantail flycatcher, the black-naped monarch flycatcher, the paradise flycatcher, which is one of the most beautiful flycatchers which one can see within the city. The red-breasted flycatchers, the verditer flycatchers, and the brown-breasted flycatchers. So flycatchers are not present within the Hyderabad limits throughout. So some of them are resident and some of them are migratory. Most of them are migratory. Let's come to the first species, the Tickell's blue flycatcher. In almost entire city, you can see this species. You can see is a statement which I should say with caution because you can hear this bird more than you can see. And then it prefers darker areas under the canopy because it stays hiding and suddenly flies out, catches a fly and comes back to the perch and then sits. They breed within the city. And then if you can see the distribution here, they are seen throughout. So let's come to the size of this bird. This is a sparrow-sized bird. The males are dark blue with a rufous reddish tinged throat till the belly. The females are more duller in color. They have a brownish color and a faint orangish tinge on their throat. And so are the juveniles. So once they molt into adult males, they attain this color. So their calls are very, very prominent. You can hear them in most of the places, even in thinly populated or thin open bush areas within the city. And they call usually in the mornings, and after a while, they usually are seen but not heard till the period of evening, and then during evenings they are back active again. So their main feed is flies. So they are basically fly catchers, which is why they catch flies. And areas where there are flies, there is a high probability that you can see birds. So if there is a small presence of little bit water or a drain where it attracts flies, there is a high possibility that you see this bird. So in almost every place within the ORR circle, you can see this bird. And then I'm sure we are also likely to see this bird during our surveys. Then comes to the fantail. This is also another resident flycatcher. Again, the same habitats, presence of flies, presence of some undisturbed foliage. They stay towards the lowermost canopy. and then they move from one place to the other. So while moving from one place to the other, they fan their tail, which earned their name called as fantails. It is slightly bigger than the sparrow. And then if you see the bird, as you see in this photograph, it has got a strong white throat, followed by a dark breast with white spots. So it is so called as the spot-breasted fantail. So while hopping also, it moves its body from left to right and then also makes a peculiar call. Although the call is not so conspicuous, listening to the call multiple times can also help you in identifying this bird. If you see the bird, it has got a very small pointed beak and a strong white eyebrow. So these are the main features of this bird. And then if you see the distribution, they are not so common within the city limits. A lot of reports are also historical, but still in well-wooded areas, in parks like Sanjeevaya Park, Indira Park, Osmania University, then all, slightly larger areas beside Aminpur Lake. And then it used to be seen nearby Fox Sagar in Hyderabad Central University. All these areas, you may see this bird. So if you want to look for this bird, where you need to look for is to look at the ground level slightly above, and it prefers dark places. So if you look at places which are having much more light, you are unlikely to see this bird unless it is in a transit. But in areas which are dark, you may find this bird. Of course, if everything permits for the presence of the species. And then this is not so shy during the breeding season, but during the other period, which is the breeding season basically between July, August, September. But during the other period, it is slightly more shyer, and then it may get disturbed easily, and then it might move deeper inside, or it might shift its position upon approach. So when you see this bird, it's better to see its behavior from a distance, and then you may still see it for a much longer period. We have the next flycatcher, which is the black-naped monarch. This is a bird which is again a resident, and which is a very conspicuous colored bird. Very attractive blue color with a prominent black patch behind its head for the male. And the female is a dull blue colored and without a black patch on its head. So they require well-wooded forests, which are also sparse in the city. So you can see the distribution very sparsely distributed in the city. So they, for example, Aminpur Lake recently was found to harbor some of these birds, and they have been spotted near the Agricultural University, in the wooded areas of the backside of the Chilkur, Balaji, the Osman Sagar and the Himayat Sagar twin lakes. So some areas do have the species throughout the year. The other areas, they are residents, they might be moving locally, but then they are very shy birds, okay, within the city. The next behavior thing is that this is a flycatcher which prefers to stay in the upper canopy and not the lower canopy. So there is this distribution where this prefers the upper canopy. On the slightest disturbance, it goes to the top of the canopy, and the bottom is whitish in color with some grayish and blue patch. So it merges if the background is sky, and then makes it more difficult for you to spot the bird. Again, this bird is very small, sparrow-sized, and so you might, even if it calls, which it calls towards the diurnal hours, but the calls are also not so easy to identify for a beginner. It will take a while to get familiar with this call to help you identify the species. It is a resident species, like I said, smaller, of the sparrow size or slightly smaller than that. Then comes the Indian paradise flycatcher. The so-called paradise is because of its beauty. It has got a prominent, shiny, not shiny, the exact word is iridescent crown, and a very long crown. The Indian paradise flycatcher has got a very prominent crown, and the males, there are different morphs. So morphs are nothing but the same species with different colors. So why these colors happen is because of a set of genes which control their plumage. So either it's dominant recessive traits. In some birds, it is rufous in color along with the tail. In some birds, it is white. So Telangana has got almost an equal distribution of the rufous as well as the white phenotypes. And then in some cases, you may also see a hybrid kind of a phenotype where you have the rufous as well as the white patches, or the white with some rufous patches. So all are the same, you don't have to get confused because of that. They are all Indian paradise flycatchers. And the males are these ones with the long tails. Sometimes you can see the males without the tails also, because since this is a very long tail, it could get caught in some processes while they are flying, and then you might see just a single tail or sometimes tailless. So juveniles have a short tail, which eventually grow longer to the size of the adult male, which you can see on the left side of this photographs. And if it is a male, what you can strongly see is a black throat, which you can see in all the three images. Whereas a female, it has got a grayish throat, a prominent crown, but the tail is also very small. So very many people try to see this bird and attempt to go to several places. But this is also a very shy bird. It keeps its distance from humans. And then when it flies from one place to another, it's a beauty to see this bird. Again, this is a sparrow-sized bird, but due to its long tail, if you can say, if it is a length which is considered, it can be as long as a myna, maybe slightly even longer. But overall, this is a small bird. Again, it catches flies. And in the well-wooded forests, okay, it prefers areas where there is some water, slight marshiness, some leaf litter decaying, which attracts flies, and then it catches those. If you see the distribution of the paradise flycatcher, you can see it throughout the city, but only in places where the disturbance is much lesser. So if you say about the paradise flycatcher, it can be called as both a resident and a migrant. It breeds in very small pockets within Telangana. For example, if you say Anantagiri Hills has got a breeding population, Bhimunipadam in Warangal has got a breeding population, then certain Narasapur has got a breeding population. A few forests have got a breeding population which are known. Of course, it will be present in much other places where it is still unknown. But other time during the summer, the birds also do a north-south migration, and some birds move south, some towards the Nilgiris, Western Ghats, Kerala, to spend the summers in that area. Again, insectivorous, basically wild flies, marshy flies, fly eater. That is the Indian paradise flycatcher. Then comes the red-breasted flycatcher. So this again is a bird which is migratory. It comes down from the foothills of Himalayas all the way through Telangana, through the central India towards the south. Some of the birds, they halt in the state in good places or places where there is an abundance of flies. They can be seen even beside your home. If there is a good bushy plantation and there is an abundance of flies, it comes there and sits and it catches flies. Once the fly population there diminishes, then it moves to the other place. So it is a bird which is not too shy. You might see in the city limits, but it is a very small bird. So it becomes difficult for you to identify, and a very dull bird because it has got a brownish overall color. And then only when it looks at you, then you can see this rufous or an orangish throat very clearly. Again, within Hyderabad, there are several locations where it has been recently spotted. But then spotting this bird is also very tricky. And we would likely have this bird during our surveys. And then if we are able to spot it, it will be very nice.
So that
Another,
previous bird was in news, right? Red-breasted
yes.
parakeet is in news.
So
Aminpur.
recently it was spotted near Aminpur Lake. So the previous 2 years it was not there because it seems that some of the habitats have been restored. So we might see some population which will be residing in the city if some of the fly populations are still present. Right. So then we come to one of our beautiful flycatchers called the bird eater flycatcher. Very light blue flycatcher, slightly bigger than all the flycatchers we just described before, like the red-breasted flycatcher or the monarch flycatcher. This is about 16 centimeters in size, whereas this is about 12 centimeters in size, slightly bigger. And this also prefers the slightly higher canopy, just like the black-naped monarch. So there is a correlation of blue flycatchers going towards the higher altitude or higher levels in the canopy for their insects hunting. So there are these, what is it? The smaller honeybees or the wild honeybees, one of the favorite food. So they prefer habitats which are conducive for honeybees, not the larger honeybees which we see in the apartments and other buildings around, but the smaller honeybees for their food. So basically within the city limits, their numbers are lesser, because you can see the distribution on the left side. Well-wooded areas where there are also flowering plants alongside parks or somewhere are one of the prime places where you can see the bird-eater flycatcher. They have been spotted several times in Aminpur Lakes, a few times in Hyderabad Central University, a few times in Osmania University, Osman Sagar, the fringes, the forest fringes, the woodland fringes of Osman Sagar and Himayat Sagar also is known to have recently noted this bird. This is a regular visitor to slightly further away places like Narsapur Forest and other places. And we do expect to see this bird during our surveys, see the presence of this bird during the surveys. If we are able to spot it, it will be well and good, and it will be very nice to note the presence of the species in the city. Next is the brown-breasted flycatcher. We could ignore this species because it is a very rare migrant to the city, but still it could actually lead to a lot of confusion between other species because they are very similar looking. Something which you can easily note in the species is a large eye with a prominent eye ring, which is a Muscicapa family flycatchers, which includes rusty-tailed flycatcher, the Asian brown flycatcher, the brown-breasted flycatcher, 3 flycatchers. This has got a peculiar pale legs when compared to the other flycatchers, which is also another point to note. Sparrow-sized, maybe even smaller than sparrow-sized, with this prominent eye, a pale base of the beak, and again, it prefers the under canopy with a lot of shadow. Again, a flycatcher of the woodlands. And you see the distribution here. So several reports are historical, but we do have some reports somewhere near Aminpur, Miapur, and also some areas near the central Musi River sides of the city. Yes. Okay, so these are the flycatchers. I'll again take a break to see if we have some questions.
Yeah, so some of the participants were asking about bird calls. It would have been nice to play bird call. So we tried in this session, but somehow we were not able to play the call. So we
Yes.
avoided that.
Yeah,
But
so we
yes,
did try to use calls so that you are also familiar with them. But at this point of time, understanding the bird features should be given more importance. Over a period of time, when you actually visit or when you actually join some of the bird watching sessions, at that time when you hear these calls, you will also appreciate the volume. Sometimes when you play a call, you think it will be very loud or it will be very feeble. So calls do help, But initially, if we can identify the birds based on its morphology, it will be the best. And then to add on during the bird walks when we conduct, we will also try to see if these birds are present and also get yourselves familiarized with the call. Although remembering these calls at the initial time is very, very tricky. And
Yeah,
then
also feel free. So since Gopal is explaining, I think by now everybody must have downloaded Merlin. So when Gopal is explaining, you can play the call in your mobile. So that way, you will know the call also. But introducing calls and details of birds together, sometimes it gets confused.
yeah, it becomes too much of data for a
Much of data.
species, and
Yeah.
then it could lead to
But
confusion.
feel free to actually play the calls in Merlin to understand how different they are. If you feel that two birds are similar looking, calls will be completely different. So feel free to play calls in Merlin by yourself. But
I
yeah,
think we have a question, Soumya.
Soumya, you can ask your question.
Yeah, so I think in surname KBR, there was a sighting or at least the call of like the ultramarine flycatcher was heard. So is that rare or is that a migrant?
so when you are
Yeah,
saying,
ultramarine flycatchers stay in the Himalayan foothills, maybe mid 4,000 meters Himalayan altitudes. And then during winters, when the weather becomes much cooler there, they migrate down south. They come all the way to South India. Some populations do stay in in Telangana. Some of the prominent places are Narasapur, which you can see. It is also seen near Aminpur, Miapur. Aminpur has been a hot spot, because it has been a place where the birds have been coming year after year. So again, they still come to some of these places. And if some of the new birds, they can also explore and then visit newer places. So where you can also see this bird.
Samia, you are
Marine
talking
flycatcher is
about,
slightly smaller than the brown-breasted flycatcher, slightly about 12 centimeter in size, but you still can see this bird.
yeah, Samia, are you referring to the call identified by Merlin? Is it what you're saying?
Uh, no, I mean, I'm not sure, but
Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
if,
I understand this. So Merlin bird calls. So Merlin also helps you to identify bird calls, but about 50% is what you can actually take it with confidence. There is still a lot of training for the app which is required so that it actually detects the birds accurately. So KBR Park Ultramarine is definitely possible, but it is rare. If you can see, we would always look for some additional form of evidence other than just the call from the Merlin identification. Yeah, a few more questions.
Akhil,
Uh, about
yeah, Akhil, go ahead.
that ultramarine flycatcher. In KBR, when we went for the walk with, I was in Sriram's group.
Yeah. Yes.
He identified ultramarine call, so that is what
Yes.
maybe.
so
Yeah.
again, Akhil, to answer your question, I had we thought that we heard the call of ultramarine flycatcher, but did we report? We didn't report because even though we heard, we need to have additional evidence. In this case, Gopal was saying, right? You might be familiar with the call, but it is better to actually have a glimpse through your naked eye. Ultramarine is one of the easiest flycatchers to identify. One is it has completely like you can say that it's a mix of blue and white, easy to identify. So during our walk, we heard the call, but we didn't report because we are not sure. Okay, we didn't have a glimpse of that bird. That's the reason we didn't report. But if you're familiar with the call, this it enables you to actually dig deep into those flycatchers and try to get a glimpse of that. Akhil.
Okay.
Yeah.
There is one more question.
Yeah. Maurya?
Yeah, hi. Gopal, regarding this migration, so sometimes people say they're coming from Europe and then Asia and then Himalayas, something like that. So is there any scientific way of knowing where these are coming from, or just by looking at it,
No,
can
no.
we? Yeah,
We cannot just look by it and say that this is coming from. We do not know.
yeah,
If you
yeah,
see a bird here, we cannot say that where the bird is coming from.
yeah,
Based on its sighting reports throughout several years, we can say where this goes back and then where it comes. For example, rosy starling or the rosy pasture. It is a bird which is predominantly seen in Europe's, and there are several murmurations, which it called, the huge flocks fly this, that, make formations. They're predominantly seen in the Europe. But
yeah,
when it becomes winter and the temperature becomes much cooler there, almost 98, almost the entire population moves to South Asia, Southeast Asia, South Asia, and about 75% of the population stays in the Indian what do you call Indian country, Indian subcontinent. So
yeah,
such birds, we know that it is moving from there to here based on this understanding where this bird is traveling. If you want to say that a bird is migrating from somewhere, you have to what you call satellite tag, track its route,
yeah,
check its track, and then tell. So
yeah.
just by
So
seeing a bird in Telangana, you
ringing is
cannot say
done.
where it is
So maybe
migrating
you can
from.
talk about ringing.
Not now,
Gopal. No,
maybe.
yeah,
But
yeah,
Maurya,
it's too much.
eBird will help you to actually know the actual distribution of each and every bird. Now, whatever Gopal is showing, right? He's showing only the Hyderabad distribution, what you're seeing. It
Yeah,
is from eBird only.
yeah.
What you need to do is whatever bird you are interested, search that name, look for distribution. You'll know clearly
Mm-hmm.
where it resides, where it winters. That way it will help. But we have a detailed session when we
Okay,
talk about the eBird session, right? We discuss about how to look for these kind of data when it comes to this thing. But to answer your question, if a
sure,
one
sure.
bird comes, right, we cannot say from which country it came.
Okay, sure. But yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I'll continue with other small birds which are possibly seen in the city. The first one is the small minivet. So it is a small bird, just like I said. It is a slender bird, There is a sexual dimorphism, which means the male looks different from the female. On the left-hand side is the male. It has got a bright orangish, what you call, throat, breast, and a slight orange streaking towards its belly. And also the sides of the wings is also orangish. It is a bird which is a kind of a forest and a fringe forest, open habitat, crossover areas. So which also allows it to be seen in small parks as well within the city. The female is very pale. Okay, when compared to the male, this is much more grayish, whereas the female is what you call much lighter in gray. And then they can be seen together or what do you call it, in a small group. So usually they are seen in pairs or a small group of 3, 4, not more than. You'll never see in larger groups. So the size is of a sparrow size, slightly elongated bird this one is. It again is insectivorous. It feeds on insects. So another way to identify the bird based on its, it again stays. It seldom goes to the tip of the branch. Even if it goes, it just goes for a few seconds and then again comes down to the next branch or next tree in terms of food. This again, how I said about the leaf bird, it stays in the same tree for the entire morning period feeding. This bird is an insectivore. You don't have so many insects in one tree or one open scrub habitats kind of a fringe. It feeds on one branch quickly, then it moves to the next branch quickly, again it moves to the next branch quickly. So it is a bird which keeps on moving alongside a stretch or an area from the branches. So, and then it stays throughout the year in the city and also it nests within the city. So if you see the distribution, it is fairly well distributed, and because of its conspicuous colors, it's also fairly well sighted as well as reported within the city. Another small bird is the Indian pitta. Indian pitta is slightly bigger in size when compared to other small birds, which I just discussed, like, the small minivet. This is a ground bird. If you see this bird, it is also called as the seven-colored bird. It's got multiple colors, a rufous vent, a bluish tail feathers, a greenish back, a yellowish belly and a forehead, a black eye stripe and a white throat. So it is a ground bird. It hops along the ground. You can see them not so frequently. It is not an easy bird to sight. It's also quite a shy bird. During the breeding season, it has two noted, very well conspicuous call, which you can hear with a distance. That is only during the breeding season, which is about July, August, September. And otherwise, it is a very silent bird. And even the slightest disturbance, it moves deeper inside the place of its habitat. And its habitat is usually marshy or semi-marshy areas within the city. For example, some of the times when we see them is just post rains, or we have an area where there is some water. And then there, for example, one of the areas where we see this bird is Himayat Sagar. So Himayat Sagar, closest to the city, on some of which side I should say, on the southern side of Himayat Sagar, there is a very flat area with a lot of tall trees and not very dense, but so trees. And that area has got constant presence of moisture. So this bird usually stays in that area, plays with this shell, sometimes feed on some of them, and then moves from one place to the other, one place to the other by hopping. And then even when you try to approach the bird, even if you try to approach too close, you'll just see that the bird gets too scared, too shy, and then flies away. So it's a very beautiful bird. And the Book of Indian Birds by Salim Ali had this bird as a cover page for a very long time. And if you see the distribution, you can see it is fairly distributed throughout the city. It comes inside. Another time when you can see this bird is when it moves. Not all it is a resident, like you said. So some of the birds come in during the summers and breed and then go. So another bird which you can see during the summer time, it goes further south, because it is flying throughout. You might see some of the reports where this bird has hit a window pane and then fallen down. So Indian pitta is a bird which is very beautiful. We'll be lucky to see this bird during our surveys, if we see them, but the bird would be present in some of the forests within the ORR limits. Aminpur Lake is one place where we regularly see them. Himayat Sagar, like I said, Osmania University has got some population, few birds. Hyderabad Central University, towards some of the lake sides, we do observe their calls, some of the areas where these birds are seen. So that is Indian pitta. So the next one is the greenish leaf warbler. So there are so many warblers, everything could get very confusing, which is why I'm not delving deep into several warblers. This is the warbler, again, which migrates from Himalayas all over the South India. So if you see this bird, it is a very small bird, smaller than the sparrow size. Okay, it has got a pale bill, a brownish green color overall. Again, a dirty white belly, slightly darker breast, and then a pale throat. Okay, this is the overall, nothing attractive in this bird. If you see the bird clearly, you can see a prominent supercilium and maybe one or two wing bars, which are so in this photograph you can see a single wing bar. This is very difficult to photograph this bird. First thing, it's very small, and then it merges very well with the background. The easiest way to identify this bird is its call. It has got a two-noted call, which is very typical. If you have Merlin, you can just take your phone and then play the call. You can hear the greenish warbler's call. So it's a which call which you can hear throughout, and it is loud call. Whenever it calls from the canopy, you still fills the forest or the woodland with its calls. You can see it everywhere. So now I stay somewhere near Nallagandla. I can still hear the calls throughout the day of this species. And It is a migrant. The entire population returns back to Himalayas towards by the March, April first week. And the earliest, it is one of the earliest birds to come along with the grey wagtails towards the South India, which is about mid-August, maybe third week of August, And then from August till March, or maybe September till March, you can prominently hear the calls of these birds and also see them. The greenish warbler also has got very similar birds, but try and see if you can identify this bird by the call more than by seeing this bird. So that is the greenish warbler. Then you have slightly bigger thrush-like birds. So Indian pitta is also a thrush-sized bird. Then we have the orange-headed thrush, very beautiful bird. Okay, so there are a few substrains, but this is also called as a white-throated thrush because of its prominent white throat. It's got two black eye stripes, which also gives the identification of this bird. Overall, it is very orangish on the head till the neck and the belly. The wings are, they call it azure bluish or dark bluish till the tail. And then this bird again is just like babblers, just like pitta, stay along the leaf litters, feed along the lines of the, along the lines of the ground where there are grubs, there are small caterpillars, there are worms. And then sometimes they are seen perching in branches, especially whenever they disturb. They immediately fly to some branches and sit. They seldom call. So there are different calls for this bird. The normal call is very seldom heard because they are usually very silent underneath the canopies. And sometimes you hear the call, which is very loud and very distinct call. So, but the identification should not be a problem of this bird because of its distinct colors. Since this bird is also shy, heavily populated areas, this bird is not present. As you can see the distribution on the left side. You can see orange-headed thrushes has been reported in the periphery of the Osman Sagar Lake a few times, near Aminpur Lake a few times, then the Hyderabad Central University a few times, and also the Osmania University. So very few areas they have been recently reported. Other reports are actually historical. And then if you want to see this bird, Anantagiri Hills is a good place where you can see them in good number. They are sometimes seen in Narasapur Forest, especially in the dark areas. And of course, you can see in other hotspots which are further away from the city. We may see this bird, which is why I included this species. This thing. Wagtails. This is the next species. There are so many wagtails. One wagtail which earlier was discussed for among the common birds is the white-browed wagtail. It's a bird which has got a black and white color and then wags its tail, horizontally, vertically. The other wagtail which I just mentioned was the grey wagtail. It's a wagtail which has got a yellow prominent vent color. And again, may or may not be seen, may be seen in the city. This wagtail is an exclusive woodland bird. And this is the forest wagtail, and so it was named. This is a wagtail which wags its tail sidewise while it is walking. That is the first difference which you can see. I have seen this bird several times in Osmania University during a few years ago. And then it is a winter migrant, just like the grey wagtail, which is a migrant, the forest wagtail is a migrant. And the third wagtail, the white-browed wagtail, is a resident. It breeds here. So these two wagtails are migratory. And the forest wagtail is kind of a vagrant towards the city. We do see some of the reports because, why vagrant? Because subsequent years, we may not see them at that place. Although Osmania University, they have been repeatedly cited. They have all been also seen in the Hyderabad Central Universities. Again, they prefer areas just like the Indian pitta, slightly marshy if there is a stream flowing, they're most happy. Some decayed wood material which can attract flies, and they fly from one bank to the other bank. In the process, they catch a fly and then land. So when they are sitting, they blend very well into the background surrounding, and also the areas are usually dark. So it's very difficult to see. If you see this bird, it is slightly bigger than a sparrow. It is slender, and then it wags its tail sideways. So once you see the bird, it's very easy to identify because of its peculiar behavior. When disturbed, they fly to a what you call a mid to canopy level branches, and then they watch from there for a long time. After a while, if the disturbance persists, they move on to a different habitat which they forage upon. Again, if you see the left side map, we have very few records of forest wagtail within the city premises, but there is a very good possibility that we see during this winter as well. This is the yellow-throated sparrow. It is again a small bird. It is a sparrow, so it's exactly a sparrow size. The prominent difference between this sparrow and the house sparrow, which we regularly see, is its prominent yellow throat. It's also called as the Salim Ali bird because Salim Ali was so fond of this bird. And it has got two prominent white wing bars. And if you also listen to this bird, it has got a two-noted call, which is very conspicuous. And it is more of a fringe bird towards the city where there is some form of agriculture or grains. If there is an adjacent forest, that is the place where you see this bird in good numbers. So in some of the birding trips where me and Sriram visited, towards the northern Telangana, Kaval, Adilabad, and other areas, we see them in great numbers, like 4,000, 5,000, maybe even more, in the stretch we see. But towards the city, the numbers are very less because their habitats are again forest and fringe habitats because they feed on the grains and they move into the forest for their roosting. So this is also a species which can be seen within the city limits. If you see the distributions, there are several records towards the western and the central Hyderabad, some of the areas which we are also surveying. And it is very much possible that we see this species during our surveys. Again, a starling, just like I said about rosy starling, this is the same size starling. So starlings are the same myna-sized birds, maybe slightly smaller than myna, this chestnut-tailing starling is. It is a resident, although we predominantly see them in winter because of its local movements within the state. And when they visit, they prefer to visit areas nearby water bodies with some good tree cover or a tree habitat. So you can see the prominent colors of this bird, which is a grayish, a whitish streak, as you can see here, a buff colored dorsum along with the throat and a rufous colored belly along with the ven. Very prominent in color. If you see the beak is yellowish and the base of the beak has got a few flaps, something like wattles or a skin which is bluish in color, which makes this bird very attractive for photographs and also very, very much present. So you can see this bird predominantly during winters, and this is one survey which we also hope to see this bird. And if you see the distribution within the Hyderabad city premises, we do have a lot of records, including historical as well as current, and then we expect to see these birds in our surveys. Okay, then I will go to the other birds which are also seen within the city. The first one is the large bill crow. So Sriram already described the house crow, which has got some the grayish neck patch and other things. Large bill crow, if is overall black with much thicker bill, and it is slightly more plantation or tree dependent bird, unlike the house crow. So don't get confused by this map which you see. It is not such a common bird. Most of the records which are seen here are historical, which I mean over 10 years ago. So the current sightings of the large bill crows are more towards the fringes of the outer ring road. There are some places nearby Shamirpet where we regularly see, some places near Gatkesar and similar areas, Panastalipuram. Also, we get to see this large bill crow regularly. It's not that it is not present, but the numbers have decreased significantly in the last 10 years. And then the sighting of this bird could be more towards the periphery of the ring road. Again, it's an omnivore. It also eats small birds in times, sometimes eggs, and it is a resident. So if you say the crow size, large bill crow is slightly bigger than the house crow. And then you can see the difference very clearly. And the call is also, it's a deeper call when compared to the house crow calls. The next bird is the yellow-footed green pigeon. We see the rock pigeons almost everywhere in great numbers. But yellow-footed green pigeon is present within the city limits. The AOC circle, has got some good banyan trees where this regularly come for foraging. And then there are several areas alongside the western Hyderabad as well as the northern Hyderabad where we see yellow-footed green pigeon, very beautiful, and it stays sub canopy to canopy level wherever in a fruiting tree. So recently, when we conducted the banyan survey of Chevalla, so there were several trees which also had yellow-footed green pigeons. They are gray-headed. What is it? A yellowish green neck and a body, and a darker wings, a blackish brown, and of course a dull green dorsum. So these color combinations merge perfectly with the trees, and so it makes sightings very difficult. And when there is a disturbance, it stays still. So the identifying feature of this bird is its yellow foot. Whereas the other birds like the rock pigeon, they have a red colored foot. And this yellow is very prominent. And then even if it is first, any kind of sightings, it leads to the identification of the species very easily. So within the city, other than AOC circle, we do have some areas near Asman Sagar, Himayat Sagar, etc., where this bird can be seen. And we also hope to see this bird during our surveys. The diet of the bird is just like other pigeons, like fruits and berries. And so, which is why whenever there is a fruiting tree, if you see a fruiting tree, there is a high probability that if the bird is present in that area, that bird would likely come to that place. A good population of yellow-footed green pigeons exists towards the western Hyderabad, the Vikarabad area, the areas near Damagundam, Anandagiri, and then you see in good numbers like 50, 100, perhaps even higher. Okay. Owls, mottle wood owl. So Hyderabad city used to have, so I should quote Ashish Pitti at some time, So each morning I walk into KBR Park to hear the call of the mottle wood owl. Unfortunately now, I think the bird has relocated because of the busy traffic and the noise which is generated. But we do have some populations, maybe pairs or maybe single individual sightings of the mottle wood out in the city. And again, it's a nocturnal bird when it calls, but there are possibilities. Just like you see this photograph, it is a daytime sighting. So there is a possibility that you see this bird during the day hours as well. Unlikely during the surveys because of the time schedules, but there is always a possibility, which is why this is also included in this session. Then we come to eagles. So one of the fastest depleting bird populations are eagles. Why? Because their prey base are drastically decreasing. Why their prey base are decreasing? Because their prey habitats are decreasing. The prey habitats are basically grasslands, and they hunt, what it calls rabbits, hares, um, the calotas and other small species, and also small birds in these areas. So since there is a loss of habitat, the population is also decreasing. Changeable hawk eagle has been reported near Aminpur once. It's been a few years ago. I exactly don't remember which year, but again, this is a bird which we may see sometimes passing through the stretches of green in the Osman Sagar and the Himayat Sagar. The other raptor which we are likely to see again is the crested serpent eagle. We also have the honey buzzard, which I think I did not include, which can be seen within the Hyderabad city limits. There are a few birds which keep on flying, hovering, and sometimes we see them perching as well. So some of the raptors, honey buzzards are likely to be seen in the Osmania University campus. They were seen a few years ago. They must be still present. Hyderabad Central University has got a pair which we may see during our surveys. And areas towards Ikrisat also has a population of the honey buzzards as well as the serpent eagles, which is a possible sites which we may see during our surveys. So otherwise, migratory raptors are also possible because ours is a winter survey. Booted eagle, which has got a white patches on its wings, which is its identifying feature, can also be seen during our surveys. Yeah, but the possibilities are slightly on the lower side. We may see them. So these are the birds which we can see in the wetlands, in the woodlands. And if you cannot see, like Sriram was telling, Merlin offers the sound ID, although it's about 50% accurate. It will give you an idea to look for what birds that you see. So you try it out. If you do not want to use the Merlin's identifying feature, you can just still use it for recording, and then your sound recordings can be accessed here. And then you can replay back or try and match it with the bird calls for the identification. Thank you. Questions, if any?
Yes, questions, please. Yes, Zahan, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Mama Zishan. Actually, uh, like last time we were in the KBR or the zoo, or like there are some activities birding going on, right? So there will be a lot of people who will be doing the birding and recording in the eBird. So like suppose if one bird is found and everyone will be recording, right? So won't there be a duplicate records? So what would be the process in that thing?
So that is an eBird related question. So you have a checklist when you enter a bird. There are multiple ways of doing this. You share the checklist with several people. So it records the time, it records the date, it records the location. So from the same location, if several checklists come, whenever you share a checklist with another person, although you think it's the same checklist, it is an independent checklist. Each record has been treated separately. So even if multiple people record the same species within the same area, it need not be taken as a separate, separate individuals. It will be taken as a single individual from a single checklist. They might consider that the numbers of birds present in that area, it can be 1, 2, based on the position, the number, and the date. So it is just the presence of species which is recorded during that time. Also the total number which one person saw. So for example, you saw 2 birds, another person saw 2 birds, and then third person sees 3 birds. So the highest count, which is likely 3 birds, will be the total count of observable birds in that area. It is not like it is total, like 2 plus 2 plus 3. It is not that way.
So Jishan, so when 10 people go, right, and 10 people have seen it, it means that it is there in 10 checklists. So it's not an issue at all. It is not a duplicate. We are just saying that 10 people have seen that bird at the same time. That's a different story. Okay. But if one out of 10 people, 9 have seen and one has not seen, we usually remove that 10th person will remove that bird from his list.
Okay.
So Gopal, I think we should also talk about hunting parties. Usually we see in the forest,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. So while I discussed about flycatchers, so in city environments, they are slightly more difficult. See, so I told that the black-naped monarchs and the predator flycatchers are staying in a slightly higher up in the canopy. So, and the lower places we have a lot of other birds. So there is some behavior which is called as a hunting party. So a hunting party is nothing but a group of different species flocking together. When there is a stretch of trees, we have the topmost layer with sometimes mynas, sometimes warblers, or a mix of mynas and warblers. The intermediate level will be filled in by there would be nuthatches, but in the city they are unlikely. But we will have, the black-necked monarch flycatcher, the Asian paradise flycatcher, the bird-eater flycatcher. So they stay in the middle, and the lower bottom would be housed or will be grouped by the jungle babblers, the thrushes, and then a few more species. These are all city birds which I just counted. So they are all in a single tree, right? This was called as a hunting party. A group of several different species flocking the same tree, which and sharing the same food habits, because they're all insectivorous. They stay in the same tree, and once one tree is completed, they move together from one tree to the other tree. This is what is called as a hunting party.
Yeah. Any more questions? You are free to ask. Yeah. Tulsi. Tulsi, you can ask.
Yeah, hello. Yeah.
Yeah. Tulsi.
Yeah, so some of the prominent birds, right, whether it's the color or some features, those are obviously much easier to identify. But the ones that are grayish or light yellowish, those are going to be quite confusing, right?
Yes,
Especially
definitely.
for us newer folks.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, let me ask my question. So my question is like, would you consider doing a session where you list out like the most common mix-ups between birds? That might be useful to just see them side by side and see what is the difference between them, or how a new bird watcher might be able to distinguish.
Yeah, that is a very fine point. Thanks, Sai Tulsi. So we can have a session where we compare a few confusion species, but I still think the best thing would be to go to the field and see these birds, because even images, So for example, if you see Sriram's images, you see the photograph of the red-breasted flycatcher as I'm showing it. It is next to impossible to see the bird as clear as this. This is one of a rare opportunity which he has captured. It is very different, like how when you see it in the field when compared to these kind of photographs. So we can discuss this. We can discuss the confusion, probably confusing species, but it will be best if we can have the next round of the field trips together, and where we actually identify the species and then differentiate them on the field.
Yeah, Tulsi, actually, all these sessions, what we planned is extremely for the beginners. Okay. Now, since this is a bird watching, actually takes some time to learn. So the thing what you ask is actually is valid, and there are multiple resources which are available. Whenever you have a doubt, right, or a confusing species, if we introduce a lot for the beginners, what usually happens was, so let's say you will be confused and might report a rare species from the city. So that's the reason we introducing only the basic species which everybody should be familiar. Now in this case, you should be familiar with
Yeah.
yellow-bill babbler. Now you are okay to report yellow-bill babbler because it is there throughout the city. But jungle babbler is even though it is similar looking, you should know the difference. That is for sure. Then, if you feel that we need next series of questions, let's say confusing species you wanted to differentiate, we will surely schedule that. Only thing is, for this atlas, time might be a constraint, but always join the bird walks, which is conducted by HBP, Hyderabad Birding Pulse, and also Deccan Birders. As many bird walks you attend, as much time you spend in the field will help you to identify better, because some species is visually very difficult and we cannot distinguish them by picture, but in the field with the help of calls it becomes easy. So okay, the to answer your question, woodland wetland birds, right, there is a comparison between similar looking species, whereas you will know more about how we compare and everything, but also what we'll try to do was we'll put that into images, we'll share it with you, all the common looking species. We'll try to create slides and share it with you people. But this session is only for basic beginners. But I will address your problem surely. We'll add slides. We may not conduct a session, but we'll share information with you, the similar looking species. I think we got a question asking the difference between pipits and larks. So that itself will take an entire 2 hours of session to distinguish between pipits and larks. So we didn't introduce those things because that will put you completely in a different world actually.
Yeah, got it. Yeah. So I just mean like on top of attending bird walks, right? But still time is quite short, right? Between now and Feb.
Yeah.
So it'll
Don't
still
worry,
be,
Tulsi, you will have a team lead who will help you.
yeah, that's fair.
Every
That's
team
fair.
has a team lead.
Yeah.
So we actually, the program is scheduled in such a way that you will not be lost throughout this program. Okay. And I hope that you're going to continue this for many more years. That way, birdwatchers actually will enjoy. And you keep on increasing. Even now, even Gopal with 20 years of experience, me 10 plus years, Ashish Pitti with 50 years experience, we do make mistakes. Okay. So it happens. So with many species, that is
Yeah,
fine.
I appreciate. I mean, Tulsi, your interest is amazing. I must invite you for some of these bird walks so
Okay.
that you can see some of these differences right in front of your eyes, and then it will actually be very, very useful.
Maybe at the end of the session, we'll share you all the information, Tulsi. There are quite a few resources which are available where they distinguish the similar looking species. We'll share the
Okay,
information.
great. Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you.
John.
Hi, Sriram, hi Gopal.
Hi.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, you mentioned about this hunting party, right? So while all these different species of birds are there in one location, do they like fight amongst each other, or
No,
they're
no,
very
no.
social?
Actually, hunting
So
party.
I will, I mean, so
Yeah.
this is a kind of a cooperation because,
Mhm.
so every tree will have a patch of insects throughout. So what happens if one species just go finish their insects and then go to the other tree? The insects again move, and so we are eating from 10 plates and none of the plates are finished. So
Hmm.
by teaming up interspecies, they can finish off one tree quickly, and then go to the next tree. By any chance, they come back to this tree and they already know that there are no insects. They can quickly hop onto the next tree. So it's a kind of a mutualism where they know that they have finished this tree by the number of insects which are present, and then they go to the next tree.
Yeah,
So
also
it's
to
to
add
improve
few
the
more points,
efficiency.
right? Yeah, few more points where let's say an woodpecker is there and the drongo is there and a flycatcher is there. Woodpecker usually what it will do, it will hit the beak, it hits the trees. Whenever it hits the trees, it usually exposes insects which are used by the flycatchers. Let's say some of the insect is caught by something else. Drongo will look to actually see whether is there any possibility to get the food. They actually go together because it helps each other in finding the food easier.
Got it. Got it. Thank you.
Very nice question, John.
Yeah.
Okay, any more questions?
Yeah,
Praveen?
one, I think, Praveen.
Praveen, go ahead.
Praveen, you can answer. Okay.
You can unmute and ask the question, Praveen.
Yeah.
I think you are muted again.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
This is about the local migratory birds.
Yes.
They come from mostly from the northern Himalayas and come to the south and go back. So I was just wondering how they come, whether they are coming for breeding or whether they are coming for food, so how they complete one cycle, especially in this winter season in south is very good for those birds, but in the northern area it will be freezing temperature. So what they are coming for, whether they breed here and take back the chicks back, or they will go back as such, where the breeding habits, their actual breeding happens.
Most
Wetland
of
bird.
the, yeah,
Please.
continue, please.
So I just want to understand how they do this cycle, one cycle
Okay.
in a year.
So in a year, most of the birds breed during the period between just after the rains. It is about June, July, August, September, and then maybe a few birds till October. So that is the main period of breeding for most of these migratory birds. So during this period, they breed in the Himalayas. And then once breeding is over, the chicks are hatched, they are weaned, and they start moving outside. The number of chicks will very quickly deplete the flies in that region. And as the temperature falls down, most of the flies either die off during that period or then move downwards towards warmer areas. So they move along with the flies all the way to parts where there is an abundance. So for the food, that is where they primarily migrate from the Himalayas towards South India. So this is an example which is within India. So most of these migratory birds, they are winter migratory birds. Okay, which means breeding happens elsewhere, and during winter they come to our place for the purpose of food.
Yeah. I've observed some of the pelicans in Coimbatore city lakes.
They're resident birds. Pelicans are resident birds.
Pelicans are residents, but not migratory.
No, not
No, they are
migratory.
not. So the
Okay.
pelicans which we see are spot-billed pelicans, and they are residents.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
So they might make a local migration, but to India, they're resident birds. To answer your question, most of the birds, they come during winter, only come to feed, not to breed.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have any question, Jia?
Yeah, Zan.
Am I audible?
ahead.
Hello.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're audible.
Okay, yeah. So my question is little like we are spotting in Hyderabad a lot of uh, rock pigeon and it is getting fed by humans. So it's like can we capture that as well, like on terrace or in some ground, some designated place where they are getting feed?
Well, I think this question falls beyond the scope of this session, but you want to capture pigeons in the terrace of apartments?
Yeah, like terrace apartments or like nearby the grounds where it is getting feed regularly.
Why you want to capture?
No,
So again, they are feral pigeons. So as per law, we are not allowed to capture any of these pigeons. And of course, it is recommended that we are not to feed any of.
capture means capturing on the eBird or
Oh,
the
Oh, okay. The recording on eBird. Yes,
recording
definitely.
on the eBird or
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you can do that, but they are already mentioned as feral pigeons. You can do that, not an issue
Yeah,
at all.
these feral pigeons
but
which we have.
yeah, that's what my again the question was related to the first question where it gets duplicated, right?
It's fine, Rian.
No,
You
it
are
does not get
mentioning.
duplicated.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I understand your point again. So I report 5,000 pigeons here. The next person reports 4,000 pigeons. That's fine. The total count of pigeons is not exceeding 5,000. That is a maximum in one area. So if there are 5,000 pigeons, there will not be 9,000 in the eventual count at any point in time. So the maximum count is what is taken as the possible number in that area, which is verified, of course, which is verified for that area. So if there are 5,000 pigeons, you see, you
I think
report.
yours is a valid question. What you are thinking was in the data perspective, Rian. So
Yeah,
Yes.
the thing
yeah,
is, yeah. So don't worry because when the analysis, the population abundance, when it is calculated, it is always taken the highest count from that place, not the number of records, what you're expecting. Don't think that it will be accumulated, let's say, in a place, if 5,000, 5,000, 5,000, 5,000 has been reported by 10 people, it will not become 50,000. It will be only 5,000 for that spot, whatever you're mentioning.
got it, got it. Yeah, yeah. Just my concern was like we are not uh, damaging or manipulating the data. That's what
Mm.
that was the concern.
No, no, no.
Yeah, we are not manipulating the data. That's fine. So thank you very much. I don't think there are any further questions for the moment.
I think we
So
exceeded our 2 hours of time.
oh, is it?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it will be good. We will
yeah,
be
good.
sharing these slides with you for you to go through.
Yeah.
Online, we have a lot of resources where you can also find some of these comparative identifications, which can actually sometimes help you, sometimes bring more confusion to the species. Birds of the world, like we discussed before, also is a very useful tool for you to understand all details about the birds, their feed, habitat, behavior, migration, what everything is known till the end, that it gets constantly updated. So if you have an eBird, that same ID can be used to log in, and that, like Sriyam said last time also, it is free for India at the moment. So please make full use of it. It's be very useful. And then for you to understand the studies, the records, the yearly migrations, there are a lot of details on its calls, subspecies, all details, all sorts of confusing details. If you're interested in delving into, that is a place that you need to go to.
Yeah.
So till the next session, thank you very much.
Yeah, and I wanted to add, next session will be on 19th, which will be wetland birds. Very important session because most of the species what we're going to see will be covered during that wetland because we have so many lakes, and it is on 19th. Make sure that you attend that session and also attend the bird walks which are conducted. I think one already Deccan Bird is announced. HBA is also doing one more bird walk because the birding is actually a practical experience. You need to experience it practically to understand more. So do attend and we'll be sharing all this. I think thank you once again.
Yeah, one last thing is that if people are available, if any of your participants are available this Sunday, we have a bird walk at Manjira, if you can just check the sites. And also Deccan Birders have a bird walk. I'm just reminding you. you can get much more hands-on with the birding and to also see a lot of people who are much more experienced in birding. So it will be another good place to venture into the field, see the birds for yourself, and also have fun on that.
Messages on our official number. If you have any clarifications, please do not flood the group.
Yeah. Please do not flood the group. You are happy to ping us personally. Okay.
Yes.
Please ping us
You
personally.
also have our official number, the HBA official number. So you can ping on that number too.
But don't put the message in the group.
Avoid wherever possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.